So Naruto was the last of the big three that I had to watch, and now that I've completely finished it, I'm ready to give my final thoughts, because wow, I was not expecting to love it as much as I actually did. It's one of those shows like Avatar and One Piece where I actually really wish I had watched it growing up, because it's the kind of thing I know I would have loved as a kid, and having that nostalgia would only make me love it even more now. Even having just watched it all for the first time as an adult though, I still think it's an S tier series. The cast, power system, fights, and themes are all so well executed, and when you combine all those traits together, it creates a very easy to follow and linear, yet deep and consistently enjoyable story, which I think is something that a lot of shonen actually struggle to achieve overall. Because for how long Naruto is to watch, I honestly wasn't really bored at any point during it. It felt way shorter than it was because I genuinely enjoyed all of it, which I cannot say the same for One Piece and Bleach. I'll go through my favorite characters, arcs, and give some proper, deeper analysis throughout the video, but I did want to just start off by talking about how Kishimoto managed to create one of the most interesting worlds in fiction. The aesthetic of the series is incredible, and the difference in aesthetic between each of the shinobi villages was just so interesting. Even character designs, weapon designs, and how some of the jutsus look are so cool yet so simple that it makes for a really easy story to actually start consuming. I feel like one of its greatest strengths was just getting straight to the point early on in the show, and once the ball got rolling, it never really stopped. Once it starts getting really good, which I would say is probably around the Chunin exams, then it doesn't really slow down at any point. It just continuously gets better and better, with each major event somehow being even better than the one before. For example, I didn't think the Pain arc could be topped, but the Fourth Great Shinobi War somehow actually met the hype and exceeded my expectations completely. So much so that I finished watching that entire arc in less than 2 weeks. It genuinely had me hooked. Anyway, let's clear comms and actually get deeper into my analysis of Naruto. Before all of that though, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel because it really does make a big difference. You can also become a member now, which is a great way of supporting the channel, and you receive special perks. Right then, let's get straight into it. Right, let's start things off by taking you guys through my top 5 characters, which let me tell you is actually a really difficult thing to do because the entire cast of Naruto is just so strong that I find it so hard to actually decide who my favorites are. But if there is one thing I do know for certain, it's that Minato is my #1 GOAT of the whole series, like no doubt about that. And it's simply because he was just a dude. Like he had no godly heritage, no reincarnated or borrowed power, no real reason for being as strong and significant as he was. He was just a good dude who somehow became one of the strongest and most respected Hokage in the history of the Hidden Leaf, the father of the boy who would save the world, the master of Kakashi and Obito, as well as the guy who tamed the power of the Nine Tails off screen. He's amazingly written, especially when it comes to his interactions with Naruto, but fundamentally Minato is just a cool guy. Like realistically, that is why he's my favorite. He's just so cool. Flying Raijin is dope, and from the second I saw him Rasengan poor little 12-year-old Obito into oblivion, I knew he was my GOAT. And speaking of Obito, well, he's my #2 for a very similar reason to Minato. In fact, Naruto even says it himself. Obito is just the coolest. Unfortunately, it was spoiled for me that Tobi was Obito and not the real Madara, but I can still appreciate how much harder that reveal would be if you saw it for the first time without knowing. I mean, Obito is quite literally the glue that holds the entire story together because literally nothing would actually happen if it wasn't for his intervention. Bro basically did what Aizen claims to have done and manipulated everything to reach the end goal of peace. And that is why Obito is so good as an antagonist especially, and why Talk no Jutsu wasn't even a bad way for him to be beaten. He literally just wanted peace and a world without hate or suffering, the exact same way that Nagato did. Now his method was definitely wrong and flawed, but he was swayed by grief and hatred. In the end though, he and Madara weren't villains. They weren't inherently evil like Sukuna or Kenjaku or Doflamingo. Obito was just so distorted by grief and hatred that he resonated with Madara's plan to use the infinite Tsukiyomi to achieve world peace. He's basically Naruto if Naruto lost his way and was consumed by hatred instead of overcoming it. I say all that, but please keep in mind I've only seen Naruto once and very recently, so I won't know or remember everything to the same level that all of you Naruto nerds do. But I do think that Obito was probably the best written character in the whole series, and his conclusion was just immaculate, especially because of how it mirrors Pain's story very nicely. Now, behind Obito, we have the next best Uchiha, Itachi of the Sharingan. Now, I shouldn't really have to explain this pick to anybody. You see, I went into Naruto obviously having heard of Itachi before, but I genuinely believed that he was a villain. Like, I thought he was just evil. I was genuinely so shocked that I had never heard his true story until Obito explained it to Sasuke. And I might actually just have to make a video dedicated to just breaking down Itachi, but he genuinely reminded me a lot of Eren Yeager. I know that sounds strange, but just hear me out for a second. Spoilers ahead for Attack on Titan, but he was faced with a very similar choice to Eren. It was his family or everybody else. Ultimately, he made the impossible decision that Eren simply couldn't make, and he chose to kill his family in order to save the village. And this also highlights one of my favorite themes in Naruto, and that is the effect of living in a war and hatred-stricken world. Itachi is one of the best examples of how sad the world they live in actually is, where children are destined to become literal child soldiers to fight in conflict started years before they were even alive. His duty as a Hidden Leaf shinobi was to protect the village no matter what, a duty that he was so dedicated to that he was willing to annihilate his entire clan and then shoulder the burden all alone as an outcast criminal in the eyes of the village that he saved. And yet, despite having that level of dedication to the village, he simply loved Sasuke enough to spare him and leave him as the sole survivor. Itachi's revival and reunion with his younger brother was also just one of my favorite events in the entire series, and the message he left his brother with once the reanimation jutsu ended was what solidified him within my top 3. Plus, it doesn't hurt that he has mad aura and his genjutsu abilities are just so unbelievably cool. Now, it might genuinely surprise a few of you to find out that my 4th favorite character in Naruto is in fact Might Guy, because I have such a soft spot for underdog characters that finally get the recognition they deserve. Might Guy was definitely just kind of cool and sort of just there all the way up until he opened the 8th gate and beat up Ten Tails Madara in a 1v1, earning Madara's respect as the strongest taijutsu user in recent history. His backstory was awesome, his mindset is awesome, his mannerisms and voice actor is awesome, he's just awesome. He's just a really cool dude. But the reason he's so high up there for me is just because I love characters who are the strongest in a specific field, and yet they go overlooked as an underdog. Guy is tragically ass when it comes to ninjutsu, but he refined his taijutsu to the point where he was an equal to Kakashi, and with the 8 gates, he just casually becomes the strongest man on the battlefield with the exception of Ten Tails Madara. Like, I don't care if the scaling suggests he is or not, the statement that the 8th gate allows Might Guy to gain strength 10 times stronger than that of the 5 Kage is enough to show that the author's intention was for 8th gate Might Guy to simply be the strongest guy among them. Hashirama low-key looks like a fraud next to 8 gates Might Guy, bro. 8 gates Might Guy would annihilate Hashirama, and yeah, I realize I have no right to say that because I've seen the show once. I'm really terrible at power scaling. I could be dead wrong, but I don't care. I'm gonna say it anyway, bro. Hashirama, low-key a fraud. Might Guy, he just came in there and he stole the show. I don't know what to say. He's just, wow. That fight was unbelievably good. But yeah, Kakashi seeing Guy and realizing that he actually surpassed him a long time ago is the moment that I decided Might Guy is actually just a top 5 character for me. That was the defining moment. And speaking of Kakashi, yep, he's my number 5. Who would have guessed? Because he's Kakashi. Like, he's one of the most iconic anime characters ever to exist. You see, what I was expecting for Kakashi was for him to be a typical mentor anime figure who had good writing but would remain pretty constant throughout the show. But nah, he had some crazy growth, not only as a person, but as a shinobi as well, because he definitely got way stronger throughout the series in the same way that his students did. And despite being insanely cool, his story with Obito, Rin, and Minato is easily my favorite story in the entire series, contested only by Itachi's. It's so good. Those are my top 5, but as for the rest of them, I'm just going to give some honorable mentions with no specific order because I genuinely love the cast so much that I can't really specify the order. But yeah, honorable mentions to Jiraiya, Tsunade, Naruto, Sakura, Shikamaru, Pain, Yahiko, Killer Bee, Tobirama, Hinata, Gaara, and pretty much everybody else, who are also just exceptional characters. And all of these people are in contention for top 10, but I can't decide, so whatever, let's move on. Right, speaking of the man himself, I want to give my thoughts on this series' main trio, which I feel like is probably the model that so many shonen after Naruto actually used to make their main trios. You have Naruto, the main character, who's the child of prophecy meant to bring peace to the shinobi world, and then the quiet and revenge-driven Sasuke, who loses his way and needs to be saved by his friends, and then Sakura, the one who always seems like is falling behind the others because she lacks the inherited power that Naruto and Sasuke have. Now, the reason that I personally love Sakura is because despite not being on Naruto and Sasuke's level, she comes as close as she can to them and is able to stand beside them in the final act of the war simply because of all the hard work that she put in, and with that she became an equal to Tsunade both in terms of medical ability and combat ability. Sakura hate is kind of just the one thing I don't really understand about the Naruto fandom. She's not exactly my number one, but she's still an amazing character. Naruto is the one who I really want to speak about though, because he definitely surprised me. I normally don't care for main characters that much, and I have to say, when I read through OG Naruto, he was definitely my least favorite part of it. I didn't really like him as a kid. He seemed like this typical I'm gonna become king of the pirates or I'm gonna be a hero type main characters, which I've seen enough of recently. Obviously Naruto was made first, but I've waited ages to actually watch it, so for me it's a very, reused main character trope. But that kind of all changed once I started watching Shippuden, because he really started to grow on me, and once he had befriended Kurama and unlocked that insanely cool looking Kurama mode, he became one of my favorite main characters in fiction. I do actually give the anime a lot of credit for that as well, because Naruto's transformations and Rasengan were so cool to me that I could not help but like him. I think the only way in that the animations failed sometimes was with impact and momentum. The choreography is great and it looks really good, but sometimes when someone hits someone else, it feels like there wasn't any real momentum or power behind it. Like anytime Naruto hits someone with a Rasengan, it kind of looks like it just touches them and we don't see any actual damage being done. I also normally hate transformations in anime, but Naruto absolutely smashed that trope out of the park with the tail V-states. They're so cool. One of my original complaints of the anime, especially when I watched original Naruto, was how everything was so desaturated. But after watching the show for a while, I got used to it and realized it was a conscious decision by the animators. And that's because not everything is actually desaturated all of the time. There are moments in certain scenes where the saturation of colors massively increases, and I came to realize that the level of saturation was set to match the current tone. In a battle or a war, the saturation is much lower, but in happy flashbacks or character interactions, the saturation massively increases. On the battlefield, Naruto and Minato's tail beast modes were incredibly vibrant and bright in order to contrast with the rest of the scene, which is often gloomy and desaturated. It's little effects like these that actually helped me to enjoy Naruto as a main character and find him really cool, at least a lot cooler than I thought he would. And yeah, I understand I've yapped a lot about animation in a section that I've titled The Main Trio. It's not really on topic, but whatever, the whole point is I'm giving all my thoughts, so screw it, you get to hear it anyway. But yeah, I felt like the saturation thing specifically needed to be pointed out because it created such a nice contrast and has the effect of making us feel hopeful when we see Naruto in that mode. Sage mode was also really cool and awesome though, especially in that pain arc. The difference in strength between a normal shinobi and a sage like Naruto, Hashirama, or even someone like Jiraiya who hasn't perfected sage mode is genuinely unreal. It's like comparing a punch from Nanami to a punch from Yuki in JJK. And actually, now that I say that, I definitely see some inspiration in Yuki's combat style and ability that I reckon Gege probably took from the likes of Tsunade and Sakura. Sasuke is definitely a cool character, don't get me wrong, and I love his story, but I found his whole narrative to be somewhat predictable, and it did get a little stale after the 79th failed attempt at making him come back to the Hidden Leaf. I mean, hell, the show ends with him still not really at the Hidden Leaf. I still love him, and he's hella cool to watch fight with some awesome abilities, but he's just not my favorite, you know? Okay, now as for the overall themes and writing of Naruto, I think it's simple yet incredibly effective. The world building is done so well to the point where you're able to understand the perspective of all parties involved and can understand why each party does what they do. With the exception of Kaguya, it doesn't really feel like there is a main villain in Naruto. All the antagonists are just people who have been influenced by the hateful world that they live in and simply want to achieve peace by any means necessary. In the end, Madara and Obito's actions actually do achieve exactly what they wanted to to in the first place, or close enough. The threat that they posed to the shinobi world led to not only all the current villagers forming an alliance, but even the older generations came together in the end. The 5 Kage fighting reanimated Madara side by side started this, but eventually even the likes of Orochimaru was fighting alongside the heroes in order to stop Madara. Their actions paved the way for Naruto to lead them to peace, and the first Great Shinobi Alliance was formed as a result of that. The endless cycle of hatred, revenge, and conflict is definitely the most prominent theme in Naruto, and it actually gives a message similar to that of Attack on Titan, for example. The only way to end the cycle is by being like Naruto. You have to shoulder the burden of hatred and overcome it, just as Naruto did many times during the series. He was neglected all of his life and could have easily turned out like Obito or Sasuke, yet he overcame the negativity and hatred by dedicating himself to becoming Hokage. In fact, my only major complaint about Naruto's story is that it is all about him becoming Hokage, and yet he somehow doesn't even become Hokage in his own show. Sure, he's Hokage in Boruto, but even that happens off screen. Like, why have you made the biggest thing about Naruto an off-screen thing that happens after the story? I don't get it. Instead, the series ended with him marrying Hinata, who he barely speaks to and never really shows any real interest in, instead of becoming Hokage. I just don't get it. I don't know. That's my only real problem with the ending. Madara being stabbed in the back by Black Zetsu was actually something that was spoiled for me ages ago, but luckily I was just so immersed in the 4th Great Shinobi War that when the time came, I'd actually completely forgotten I even knew that happened. And I'll be honest, as much as it wasn't my favorite writing choice, and it definitely wasn't the best way to conclude Madara's story, I didn't hate it as much as some other people did. I think the rest of the ending was perfectly fine. The final theme that I noticed in my first watch of Naruto, though, was the idea of child soldiers and the type of life that shinobi actually live. The entire show feels like a big analogy for the endless cycle of war and conflict. It teaches a lesson that should really be paid attention to more, especially in the type of world we live in today. Shikamaru's and Naruto's relationship with their respective dads is probably how this theme is best portrayed, in my opinion. Their parents made decisions for their child that would lead to them being perfectly equipped to survive in the world that they live in and make a difference in the world that they live in. Minato made the decision to trust his son and seal the 9 tails in him, and Shikamaru's dad encouraged him to become a shinobi and a leader, because having those skills is the best way to survive and make a difference. But when you look at those choices from our perspective, in a world that's nothing like theirs, this is horrific parenting. Like, why are you sealing a demon inside your child? But when you look at it from their point of view, it is probably the best way to, like, protect everybody and their child. They're just doing what they need to do to make sure that their children are best equipped to survive in the world that they are in. Pain and Obito were much the same. All of their actions, no matter how cruel and violent, were done out of genuinely good intentions, because that is what they judged to be right. As the main character, Naruto is meant to show us how to overcome the cycle of hate instead of succumbing to it like Obito and Pain did. That's why Talk no Jutsu actually works really well in Naruto, despite it being a bit of a meme. I was fully expecting to hate the Talk no Jutsu stuff that I knew was coming, but I can't think of a single better way to conclude Pain's and Obito's stories. I love it. Now, the final thing I wanted to discuss is the fights and the quality of animation that went into this show, especially Shippuden, because I can't lie, OG Naruto was a lot harder to watch, so I just read it. Kakashi versus Obito, hands down, the best fight in the show, and one of the best fights in anime, I have to admit. No further explanation needed. I don't see anyone really disagreeing with that take. Gaara versus Rock Lee, again, no explanation should be needed. It was just an awesome introductory fight to the world of Naruto. Pain versus Sage Mode Naruto was also amazing, and remains one of my favorite events in the entire series. Pain versus Out of Control Tail Beast Naruto, though? Yeah, you know the episode I'm talking about. That is probably the best episode in the whole show, I'm not even gonna lie, and I'm pretty sure it is the highest rated on IMDb. I remember it so clearly because that episode was the one that turned Naruto from a pretty solid B tier to an absolute S tier series for me. The animation and choreography in Naruto Shippuden was already way ahead of its time, but that fight was just something else. The entire animation style changed, and it became more similar to the flowy type of animation that they use these days in shows like JJK and One Piece. It was perfection. It was absolutely amazing. Minato vs Obito during the Nine Tails attack is obviously another favorite of mine because duh. Honestly, there are so many other awesome fights in the series that I can't even begin to list them all, but considering when it was made, Naruto Shippuden is definitely the best animated and choreographed out of the big three, and no, I don't think it's really close. I mean, hell, I prefer Shippuden's animation to current One Piece, and that's really saying saying something, because current One Piece can be pretty damn good sometimes. Thousand Year Blood War anime still clears both of them in terms of animation though, like, obviously. Now, obviously, I have way more to say about Naruto as a whole, and to longtime fans of the show, I won't have said anything you haven't heard before. But the point of this video was to just briefly give my first impressions. I have my issues with Naruto, don't get me wrong, but overall my criticisms are very minimal and mainly stem from the beginning of the story. A lot of the issues I had bother me so much less now that I've actually finished it as a whole. Overall, Naruto is definitely my favorite out of the big three and one of my favorite stories of all time. Shippuden is a low-end S tier for me with a solid 8.5 out of 10. It's so good. Now, if you want to see me make more Naruto or just big three content in general, then make sure to let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and become a member if you feel like it. Feel free to join the Discord and follow me on Twitter, links below. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in a bit.